She got in the wrong car. On New Year's Eve, Billionaire locked the doors and said you're not leaving. On a night filled with fireworks and celebration, a terrified woman running from her abusive past jumps into what she thinks is her rideshare. But the doors lock, and the man behind the wheel calmly tells her, "You're not leaving." At first, she thinks she's made the worst mistake of her life, until armed men suddenly surround the street, and the car speeds away just in time. He didn't trap her. He saved her. Now she's hidden inside a high-security penthouse with a powerful billionaire who claims he's been protecting her for years. As danger closes in, she learns she's the only witness to a crime tied to a ruthless family. And her past may hold a secret that could destroy his entire empire. But as trust turns into something deeper, one question remains. Was getting into the wrong car an accident, or fate? And how far will they go to survive the truth? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The night sky over Chicago exploded with bursts of color as the New Year's celebrations began. But Naomi Carter couldn't enjoy their beauty. Her heart pounded against her chest as she pushed through the festive crowds, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Every flash of light made her flinch, reminding her that somewhere in this sea of celebrating people, he was looking for her. She'd recognized his face earlier, watching her from across the street. After 3 years of hiding, changing jobs, and building a new life, Marcus had found her again. The restraining order was just a piece of paper to him. It always had been. Naomi's fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone, desperately trying to call for help. The screen flickered once, then went black. No, please," she whispered, pressing the power button repeatedly. But her dead phone remained silent, as useless as that restraining order. The sound of fireworks grew louder, mixing with the shouts and laughter of partygoers. Naomi's cotton sweater clung to her skin, damp with sweat despite the winter chill. She scanned the street frantically, relief washing over her when she spotted a sleek black sedan idling at the curb. It had to be her rideshare. She'd requested one just before her phone died. Without hesitation, she yanked open the back door and slid inside. The car's interior was warm and smelled of leather, but something felt off. There was no friendly greeting, no confirmation of her name or destination. Instead, she heard the distinctive click of the doors locking. "You're not leaving?" came a calm, measured voice from the front seat. Naomi's chest tightened as she looked up to meet the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror. They were steady and unblinking, set in an older man's face that showed no emotion at all. This wasn't her rideshare driver. The familiar feeling of being trapped crashed over her like an icy wave. Her hands began to shake as memories flooded back. Marcus blocking doorways, Marcus taking her keys, Marcus telling her when she could leave and where she could go. 3 years of therapy hadn't erased the terror of those moments. "Please," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Please let me out." The driver didn't respond. Outside, another round of fireworks painted the sky in red and gold, their booms echoing off the buildings. The celebrations seemed distant now, as if she'd stepped into another world entirely, one where joy and freedom were just illusions. Naomi's fingers found the door handle, wrapping around it with desperate strength. Just as she began to pull, angry shouts erupted outside the car. Multiple voices were yelling, their words muffled by the sealed windows and the continuing explosions overhead. Her heart seemed to stop in her chest. Was it Marcus out there? Had he found her after all? Or were these new threats, unknown dangers waiting in the night? The handle beneath her fingers felt like her only chance at escape, but she couldn't make herself move, frozen between the terror inside the car and whatever awaited her outside. Through the tinted windows, shadows moved across the street, their forms distorted by the intermittent flashes of fireworks above. The shouts grew louder, closer, and Naomi's breath caught in her throat as she realized she had mere seconds to decide: stay trapped in this stranger's car or face whatever chaos waited beyond those locked doors. The driver remained perfectly still, watching her in the mirror with those unnervingly calm eyes. The contrast between his composure and the chaos outside made everything feel surreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But this was real. All too real. The leather seat beneath her was soft and expensive, nothing like the worn fabric of a typical rideshare vehicle. How had she not noticed that when she got in? Fear had made her careless, and now she was paying the price. Again. More fireworks burst overhead, their light filtering through the car's windows in strange patterns. Each boom made Naomi jump, her nerves stretched to their breaking point. The shouting outside grew more intense, and she could see more shadows gathering around the car. Her fingers tightened on the door handle as sweat dripped down her back. In that moment, all she could think about was her mother, who had always told her to trust her instincts. Those instincts were screaming now, telling her that she was in danger both inside and outside this car. But at least outside, she had a chance to run. The driver shifted slightly in his seat, and Naomi's focus snapped back to him. He hadn't moved to stop her yet, hadn't threatened her, but his very stillness was a threat in itself. The power to keep her trapped lay in his hands, just as it had once lain in Marcus's. A particularly loud explosion overhead made the car windows rattle, and the shouts outside reached a fever pitch. Naomi's grip on the door handle tightened until her knuckles turned white, her body tensed for whatever might come next. Before Naomi could draw breath to scream, dark figures materialized from the shadows. They moved with deadly purpose, their long coats failing to hide the metallic glint of weapons. The street that moments ago had been filled with revelers was now eerily empty, except for these masked men converging on the car. The driver's foot slammed down on the accelerator. The powerful engine roared to life, and Naomi was thrown back against the leather seat as the car shot forward. Her hands scrambled for purchase as they weaved through traffic at frightening speed. Behind them, sharp cracks split the air, gunshots nearly indistinguishable from the continuing fireworks overhead. "Stay down," the driver commanded, his voice still remarkably calm, as he executed a sharp turn that sent them skidding around a corner. Naomi ducked below the window line, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. The car swerved again, and she heard more shots, followed by the ping of bullets striking metal. Through it all, the driver maintained perfect control, threading the vehicle through gaps in traffic that seemed impossibly narrow. His hands moved smoothly on the wheel, each motion precise and calculated. After several more turns and what felt like an eternity, the sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the normal bustle of Chicago's New Year's celebrations. "I believe we're clear now," the driver said, checking his mirrors one final time. "You can sit up, Ms. Carter. You're safe." Naomi slowly raised herself from the floorboard, her limbs shaking. "How do you know my name?" she managed to ask, her voice rough with fear. The man's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror again, but this time she noticed something different in them. Concern, perhaps even kindness. "My name is Elias Whitmore," he said, "and I've been trying to keep you alive for the past 3 months." Naomi's mind reeled at his words. "What? Why? What's happening?" "Those men weren't there for me," Elias explained, navigating through the city with smooth efficiency. "They were waiting for you. You unknowingly walked into an assassination setup when you turned down that street." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "An assassination? That's impossible. I'm nobody. I work at a community center. I teach art to kids." "You're far from nobody, Ms. Carter. You've become very important to some very dangerous people, though you don't know why yet." Elias's voice remained steady, almost gentle. "When you got into my car, you weren't being trapped, you were being rescued." Naomi's thoughts spun wildly. She had been running from Marcus, convinced he'd found her again. But now this stranger was telling her there were far worse threats lurking in the shadows. "How long have you been watching me?" "Since September," Elias replied. "When certain individuals began taking an unusual interest in your daily routine, I've had a security team monitoring your movements, ensuring your safety. Tonight, however, they made their move sooner than we anticipated." The car descended a ramp, leaving the chaos of the streets behind. Ahead, a private garage entrance opened smoothly, revealing a brightly lit underground parking area. As they passed through the gate, Naomi realized with startling clarity that her life had just changed irrevocably. The normal world of lesson plans and grocery shopping seemed to belong to another lifetime now. The car came to a stop in a reserved space near a private elevator. Elias turned in his seat to face her fully for the first time. His face was lined with experience, but his eyes held a steadfast resolve that somehow made Naomi feel more grounded. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said quietly. "But I give you my word. Everything I've done tonight was to protect you. And I will continue to do so until we uncover why these people want you silenced." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, waiting to carry them up into whatever new reality awaited. Naomi looked at the man who had just saved her life, trying to reconcile the terror of the past few minutes with the growing certainty that he was telling the truth. The night that had started with her running from one threat had transformed into something far more complex and dangerous. High above them, muffled by layers of concrete and steel, the fireworks continued to paint the sky, marking the beginning of a new year. But for Naomi Carter, they marked the beginning of something far more momentous, a journey that would reveal truths she never imagined and change her life forever. The sleek black sedan glided into an underground garage, passing through multiple security checkpoints before coming to a stop in a reserved space. The harsh fluorescent lights cast sharp shadows across the polished concrete floor, making everything feel slightly surreal to Naomi. Her heart was still racing from their escape, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Elias stepped out first, his movements precise and controlled as he opened her door. "We need to move quickly," he said, his voice low but firm. "This elevator goes directly to my penthouse. You'll be safe there." Naomi hesitated for just a moment before following him. The garage felt like a fortress, all reinforced walls and security cameras tracking their every move. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space as they approached a private elevator with a biometric scanner. "I know you have questions," Elias said as he pressed his palm to the scanner. The doors opened with a soft chime. "But involving the police right now would only make things worse. There are certain families in this city, powerful people, who have corrupted parts of law enforcement." Inside the elevator, Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, trying to process everything that had happened. The glass walls showed their ascent through the building, Chicago's glittering skyline growing more magnificent with each floor. "You said, you've been watching out for me?" Her voice trembled slightly. "How? Why?" Elias turned to face her, his expression grave. "Do you remember an incident at Marshall Park about 6 months ago? A near miss with a car that seemed suspicious at the time?" Naomi's eyes widened. The memory hit her like a physical force, a black SUV that had swerved toward her while she was jogging, missing her by inches. She'd convinced herself it was just a careless driver. "That wasn't an accident?" "No," Elias replied quietly. "That was their first attempt. We've been monitoring threats against you ever since." We? Naomi's head was spinning. The elevator continued its smooth climb, passing the 50th floor. I have resources, Elias said simply. People I trust. We've been working to keep you safe, even if you didn't know it. Before Naomi could ask more questions, the elevator slowed to a stop. The doors opened into a spacious foyer, warm light spilling out to greet them. The penthouse stretched before them, all clean lines and elegant furnishings, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's New Year's celebrations far below. But what caught Naomi's attention wasn't the luxury. It was the woman standing near the entrance. She appeared to be in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that seemed to look straight into Naomi's soul. She wore a simple dark dress and carried herself with quiet dignity. Mrs. Brooks. Elias nodded to her. Thank you for waiting. Of course. Mrs. Brooks replied, her voice warm and rich like honey. She moved forward, her presence somehow filling the space with a sense of safety that made Naomi's shoulders begin to relax for the first time since she'd fled into the night. You must be frozen, dear. Come in properly. Naomi realized she was still shivering, though whether from cold or shock, she wasn't sure. Mrs. Brooks guided her toward a comfortable sitting area, her touch gentle but sure on Naomi's elbow. Let me get you some water, Mrs. Brooks said, moving to a nearby wet bar with practiced efficiency. Something cool and calm for your nerves? Naomi sank into the soft leather of an armchair, watching as Mrs. Brooks filled a crystal glass with filtered water. The older woman's movements were unhurried, almost peaceful, creating a bubble of tranquility that seemed to push back against the chaos of the night. Small sips, Mrs. Brooks advised, handing her the glass. You've had quite an evening. Naomi wrapped her fingers around the cool glass, feeling its solid weight ground her in reality. The water touched her lips, and she suddenly realized how thirsty she was. As she drank, she became aware of other sensations too. The soft throw pillows behind her back, the distant pop of continuing fireworks, the gentle hum of the building's heating system. Elias stood near the windows, his posture alert but not tense, while Mrs. Brooks settled into a nearby chair, her presence as steady as a lighthouse in a storm. For the first time since she'd started running hours ago, Naomi felt the iron bands of fear around her chest begin to loosen. The realization hit her with unexpected force. She was safe. At least for tonight, in this fortress high above the city, with this unlikely pair of guardians, she was truly safe. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back, taking another sip of water instead. Mrs. Brooks seemed to notice anyway, offering her a soft smile that held no judgment, only understanding. You're not alone anymore, dear, she said quietly. Not anymore. Bursts of color splashed across the penthouse windows, painting the cream-colored walls in fleeting hues of red and gold. Naomi wrapped her hands around the warm mug Mrs. Brooks had given her, drawing comfort from its steady heat. The older woman sat beside her on the plush sofa, her presence as soothing as a warm blanket on a cold night. I met James at church. Naomi began softly, her eyes fixed on the swirling steam rising from her tea. He seemed so kind at first, always saying the right things. But after we married... Her voice caught, and she took a steadying breath. It started small, checking my phone, questioning where I'd been. Then came the shouting, the pushing, the threats. Mrs. Brooks reached over and patted Naomi's hand. You don't have to share everything tonight, dear. It helps, actually, Naomi admitted, managing a small smile. I ran away 3 years ago, with nothing but my purse and faith that God would show me a path. Found work at a coffee shop, started taking online classes. I thought I was finally free until... She glanced toward the windows where the fireworks continued their celebration, so different from the gunshots that had chased them earlier. In another room, they could hear Elias speaking in low tones on the phone, his voice a steady murmur of authority and control. The sound of small feet padding across hardwood floors drew their attention, and a young boy, no more than 5 years old, appeared in dinosaur pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Grandma?" he called out, his voice carrying the drowsy confusion of a child awakened by noise. "The sky is all sparkly." "Caleb, sweetheart, you should be in bed," Mrs. Brooks said gently, but the boy was already moving towards them, his curiosity obviously piqued by the stranger on their sofa. "Hi," he said to Naomi, offering a shy wave. "I'm Caleb." Naomi's face softened into a genuine smile. "Hi, Caleb. I'm Naomi. Are the fireworks keeping you awake?" He nodded, climbing onto the sofa between them. "They're pretty, though, like gods throwing a party in the sky." The simple innocence of his words made both women chuckle, easing some of the tension in the room. Elias's footsteps approached from the hallway, and Caleb's head turned at the sound, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "Mr. Elias," he exclaimed, but stayed curled against his grandmother's side, studying the tall man with unusual intensity for such a young child. Elias nodded to the boy, his usual composure firmly in place. "Hello, Caleb. You should be asleep." "Mommy showed me your picture," Caleb said suddenly, his voice dropping to that particular whisper children use when sharing important secrets. "She said you're my daddy, but you don't know yet." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shocked silence. Mrs. Brooks's hand flew to her mouth, while Naomi felt like an accidental witness to something intensely private. Elias stood frozen, his carefully constructed world visibly tilting on its axis. The color drained from his face as he stared at the little boy, seeing him perhaps truly for the first time. Caleb looked back with innocent curiosity, swinging his feet against the sofa cushions, unaware of the magnitude of his revelation. "Helen." Elias's voice came out rough, unlike his usual measured tones. "I need to speak with you. Privately." Mrs. Brooks rose slowly, her own face a mix of emotions, surprise, worry, and something that looked almost like relief. "Of course," she managed, turning to Naomi. "Would you mind watching Caleb for a moment, dear?" Naomi nodded, still processing the scene unfolding before her. "Of course. We'll be fine." As Elias and Mrs. Brooks disappeared down the hallway, their footsteps heavy with unspoken words, Naomi found herself alone with Caleb, who was now tracing patterns on the sofa fabric with his finger. "Want to count the fireworks with me?" she offered, grateful for the simple presence of a child in this moment, laden with adult complexities. "Yes, please." He smiled, scooting closer to the window. "I got to 7 before I lost count." Together they watched the sparkling display, counting each burst of light. While down the hall, long-buried truths waited to be unearthed. The weight of secrets pressed against the walls of the penthouse, as heavy as the winter night outside, while Chicago celebrated the promise of a new year, unaware of the lives changing in this high rise above its glittering streets. The penthouse fell into a heavy silence after Mrs. Brooks and Elias stepped away. Naomi sat alone in the spacious living room, watching the last scattered fireworks paint colors across the Chicago skyline. Her hand still trembled slightly around the warm mug of tea Mrs. Brooks had pressed into them before leaving. Minutes ticked by slowly until footsteps announced Elias's return. His usual composed demeanor showed cracks, his tie loosened, his shoulders carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. He sank into the leather armchair across from her, running a hand through his silver-streaked dark hair. "I owe you several explanations," he said, quietly, his deep voice rough with emotion. More than I realized when this night began. Naomi wrapped her fingers tighter around the mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "The little boy?" she prompted gently. Elias nodded, his gaze distant. "His mother is Amanda Brooks, Helen's daughter." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "We met 6 years ago at a charity event. She was different from anyone I'd known, genuine, kind, unimpressed by wealth or status. We fell in love." The pain in his voice made Naomi's heart ache. "What happened?" "My family happened." Bitterness crept into his tone. "I was going to propose, but suddenly Amanda disappeared. Her number disconnected, her apartment emptied. Helen was transferred to another household. I searched, but—" He shook his head. "I've only recently discovered how thoroughly my father's people orchestrated it all. They saw her as beneath our family's station." Naomi watched understanding dawn across his features. "You never knew about your son?" "No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "Though now, looking at him, I should have known. He has my mother's eyes." A comfortable silence settled between them as Elias processed this revelation. Outside, the city's celebration was winding down, leaving only distant echoes of music and laughter. "There's more you need to know," Elias finally continued, "about why I was there tonight, why I've been watching over you." He met her eyes directly. "I knew your mother, Naomi." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "She worked as a private nurse for my father 15 years ago during his first bout with cancer." His voice softened with respect. "Grace Carter was an extraordinary woman. She saved my life." Naomi leaned forward, hunger for information about her mother overwhelming everything else. "How?" "I was investigating some irregularities in the family business, things that didn't add up. One night I found documents I wasn't supposed to see. Someone caught me." His jaw tightened. "I was meant to have an accident on the stairs. Your mother happened to be working late. She found me, got me medical help, kept quiet about what really happened." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes as she pictured her mother, always so caring, so principled, helping this man who now sat before her. "That sounds like her." "I never got to thank her properly." Regret colored his words. "When she died 6 months later, I knew it wasn't the accident everyone claimed, so I started watching out for you, making sure you were protected. It was the least I could do." Dawn was beginning to paint the sky in pale pinks and golds when Elias finally revealed the heart of the matter. "Your mother didn't just save my life that night, Naomi. She preserved evidence of what I'd found, proof of decades of criminal activity, money laundering, fraud. Billions of dollars worth of crimes that could bring down not just my family's empire, but half the power structure in Chicago." Naomi's breath caught as pieces clicked into place. "That's why those men were trying to kill me tonight. They think I have whatever evidence she left behind." "Yes." Elias's expression was grave. "And they won't stop looking. The only reason you've survived this long is that they weren't certain you were a threat. But something changed. They're moving more aggressively now." Rising from his chair, Elias walked to the window, his silhouette stark against the brightening sky. "I can protect you, but you'll have to stay here, hidden, at least until we can figure out where your mother stored the evidence and how to use it safely." Naomi sat very still, processing everything she'd learned. Her mother's mysterious death, the years of hiding from her ex, the constant feeling of being watched. It all led here, to this moment, this choice. Looking up at Elias, she saw not just her protector, but a man fighting his own battles against the very power structure that had shaped him. A man who'd lost love and found an unexpected son in one night. A man trying to right long-buried wrongs. This isn't just about surviving anymore, is it? She asked quietly. No, Elias agreed, turning back to face her. This is about truth. Justice. The very things your mother died trying to protect. The weight of the moment settled around them as the first real rays of sunlight spilled into the room. Naomi thought of her mother's favorite saying, "Truth is light. It always finds a way to shine." Perhaps this was what she'd meant all along. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow across the guest room where Naomi lay beneath soft cotton sheets. For a moment, she blinked in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings, the elegant cream walls, the plush carpet, the gentle hum of central heating. No sirens, no neighbors' arguments, no footsteps that made her heart race, just silence. Beautiful, peaceful silence. Naomi sat up slowly, running her fingers over the silky fabric of her borrowed nightgown. Mrs. Brooks had insisted on lending it to her the night before, along with basic toiletries and a genuine motherly hug that had nearly brought tears to her eyes. After years of looking over her shoulder, of sleeping with one ear alert for danger, the sensation of true safety felt almost foreign. A gentle knock at the door made her start despite herself. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Brooks's warm voice called out. "Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes if you'd like to join us. I've left some fresh clothes outside your door." "Thank you," Naomi replied, her voice still rough with sleep. "I'll be there soon." The bathroom attached to her room was bigger than her entire studio apartment. As she showered and dressed in the simple but expensive-looking outfit Mrs. Brooks had provided, dark slacks and a soft blue sweater, Naomi tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. The attempted assassination, Elias's revelation about her mother, the little boy who had turned Elias's world upside down with just a few innocent words. When she made her way to the kitchen, the smell of coffee and fresh bread made her stomach rumble. Mrs. Brooks was at the stove, humming as she flipped pancakes, while her grandson Caleb sat at the counter, swinging his legs as he carefully arranged blueberries into smiley faces on his breakfast. "Good morning." Elias's deep voice came from behind her, making her jump slightly. He was already dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark pants, though his usual tie was absent. "I hope you managed to get some rest." "I did, thank you," Naomi said softly, taking the seat Mrs. Brooks gestured to. "It's been a while since I felt safe enough to really sleep." Something flickered in Elias's eyes. Concern, perhaps, or guilt. He sat down across from her as Mrs. Brooks served them both plates of pancakes. "We need to discuss security. Protocols?" he said, his tone gentle but firm. "The situation is more complicated than I initially thought." Naomi's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I received confirmation early this morning about the men who tried to kill you." Elias's jaw tightened. "They work for my family's private security network, which means this goes higher than just local corruption." The pancakes suddenly felt heavy in Naomi's stomach. "Your own family tried to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Money makes people do terrible things," Mrs. Brooks said quietly, placing a comforting hand on Naomi's shoulder. "But God's protection often arrives disguised as inconvenience. Remember that." Caleb looked up from his breakfast, his young face serious. "Are the bad men coming here?" "No, buddy," Elias assured him quickly. "This is the safest place in the city. Which brings me to those protocols." He turned back to Naomi. "For now you need to stay inside the penthouse. The security system is state-of-the-art, and the elevator only operates with specific clearance. The windows are bulletproof, and there are panic rooms if needed." Naomi set her fork down, guilt washing over her. "I can't ask you to risk everything for me. Your family—" My family lost the right to my loyalty long ago. Elias interrupted firmly. They've been manipulating and controlling things from the shadows for years. What they did to Caleb's mother, what they're trying to do to you, it stops now. I've seen too many good people hurt by powerful men who think money puts them above God's law. Mrs. Brooks added, her usual gentle tone carrying steel beneath it. Sometimes standing up for what's right means accepting help when it's offered. Naomi looked down at her plate, fighting back tears. But why? Why risk everything for me? Because your mother saved my life once, Elias said softly. And because it's the right thing to do. The evidence she left behind, whatever it is, could bring down decades of corruption. That's worth protecting. You're worth protecting. They ate in thoughtful silence for a while, broken only by Caleb's occasional giggle as he continued making faces with his food. Naomi watched Elias with the boy, noting how his usual rigid composure softened when he helped Caleb cut his pancakes or answered his random questions about butterflies and spaceship toys. As Mrs. Brooks cleared the dishes, Elias's phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. The confirmation just came through with details, he said quietly. The hit squad was definitely operating under direct orders from our family's security chief. They're trying to clean up loose ends. Permanently. Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, remembering the sound of gunshots mixing with fireworks, the terror of that moment before she realized Elias was there to help, not hurt. What do we do now? We stay careful, we stay hidden, and we find the truth your mother died. Protecting. Elias's voice was steady, determined. I have resources they don't know about, contacts they can't trace. We're going to expose everything, Naomi. I promise you that. And in the meantime, Mrs. Brooks said firmly, we trust in God's timing and take care of each other. Now, who would like more pancakes? Caleb's hand shot up enthusiastically, bringing small smiles to everyone's faces, despite the weight of the moment. Naomi watched the morning light playing across the kitchen, reflecting off windows that could withstand bullets, and felt an odd mix of fear and hope. For the first time in years, she wasn't facing danger alone. Maybe Mrs. Brooks was right. Maybe what seemed like an inconvenience was actually divine protection in disguise. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the penthouse living room as Elias directed two security-cleared moving personnel to carefully arrange several boxes from a hidden storage unit. Naomi watched from the doorway, arms crossed, as her life's belongings, what little she'd managed to save, appeared one by one. I hope you don't mind, Elias said softly, dismissing the movers with a nod. After I learned about the threats against you, I had your things moved from your old storage locker to a more secure facility. Just in case. Naomi walked over to the nearest box, running her fingers along the worn cardboard. You really have been watching out for me all this time, haven't you? Your mother protected me once. I owed her, and you, the same care. Elias's voice carried a weight of responsibility that seemed to press down on his shoulders. Together, they began sorting through the boxes. Most contained practical items, clothes, a few books, some cherished photos. But in the bottom of the last box, wrapped carefully in an old quilt, Naomi found something that made her breath catch. Mom's journal, she whispered, holding the worn leather book close to her chest. I kept it just to feel close to her, you know? I never really read it much. It hurt too much after she died. Elias sat down beside her on the couch. Maybe it's time to look again. Sometimes the past holds answers we didn't know we needed. With trembling fingers, Naomi opened the journal. Her mother's familiar handwriting filled the pages. But as they began reading together, it became clear these weren't just personal reflections. Between accounts of daily life and prayers for guidance were detailed notes about financial transactions, dates, amounts, and names. "Wait," Elias said suddenly, pointing to an entry. "That's my father's signature. And that account number, I know that series. It was used for offshore holdings that were never declared." Naomi's eyes widened as she turned page after page. "Mom worked as a nurse for your father, but these notes, she was documenting everything she saw. Bribes to judges, payoffs to silence victims, millions of dollars moved through shell companies. Your mother wasn't just a nurse," Elias said quietly. She was gathering evidence, building a case. They read further, the afternoon light fading as they uncovered more details. Money laundering schemes, falsified medical records, suspicious deaths labeled as natural causes. With each revelation, Naomi felt her heart beating faster. "Elias," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at this entry. 3 days before my mother died." She pointed to a shaking line of text. "Cannot keep quiet anymore. The things they've done. God forgive me for my silence. Meeting with lawyers tomorrow." But she never made it to that meeting, Elias said, his face growing pale. The official report said it was a heart attack. "She was healthy." Naomi's voice cracked. "She jogged every morning, ate better than anyone I knew. I never questioned it because I was so broken by grief. But now we know why they want you dead," Elias finished grimly. "They must have discovered she left evidence behind. They've been searching for these records for years." Naomi closed the journal, her hands shaking. "Your family. They killed my mother. And now they're trying to kill me too." Elias stood up abruptly, pacing the room. His usual composed demeanor cracked as he ran his hands through his hair. "Everything I own," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every dollar in my accounts, every building with my name on it, it's all built on blood money, on corruption and murder." "Elias, you didn't know—" "I suspected," he cut in. "Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. But I looked the other way because it was easier, because I told myself I was different from my father." He turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. "No more. I don't care what it costs me. We're going to expose everything, every crime, every cover-up, every cent of dirty money." "They'll destroy you," Naomi said softly. "Your whole world? Let them try." Elias walked back to where she sat and knelt down, taking her hands in his. "I choose truth over wealth, Naomi, no matter the cost. Your mother died trying to bring justice to light. I won't let that sacrifice be in vain." The journal lay between them on the coffee table, its pages holding secrets that could tear down an empire. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle on as dusk settled over Chicago. But inside the penthouse, something far brighter was dawning. The light of truth, long hidden, finally breaking free. As the sun began to set over Chicago's skyline, casting long shadows across the penthouse's living room, Naomi moved to stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The journal's revelations weighed heavily on her heart, but somehow the fading light brought a strange sense of calm. Elias joined her, offering a cup of tea. "Mrs. Brooks always says tea helps steady the nerves," he said softly. "Thank you." Naomi wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "You know, during the worst times with Marcus, my ex, I would stand at windows just like this. Sometimes it was the only thing that kept me going, watching the world continue on, knowing God must have a bigger plan." Elias leaned against the window frame, his reflection ghosted in the glass. "How did you hold on to faith through all of that?" "Prayer," Naomi said simply. "When Marcus would rage, when I felt most alone, I would pray. Not just formal prayers, but conversations with God. Sometimes they were angry conversations, sometimes just desperate pleas. But prayer, it became my shelter, my hiding place when there was nowhere else to hide. I haven't prayed in decades, Elias admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Not since I was a child. It felt hypocritical, I suppose, building this empire while ignoring where the foundation came from. The city lights began twinkling on one by one, like stars being born in the gathering dusk. Naomi turned to study his face. Money became your shelter, didn't it? My shield, he corrected. I told myself if I had enough power, enough control, I could prevent the kind of corruption my father specialized in. But really I was just hiding, using wealth as an excuse to avoid facing hard truths. And now? Naomi asked gently. Elias was quiet for a long moment, watching the city pulse with evening life below. Now I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. Real hope, not just the artificial security money provides. The thought of losing everything should terrify me. But instead, he shook his head, smiling slightly. Instead, it feels like freedom. Second chances often come disguised as losses, Naomi said, remembering words her mother used to say. When I finally escaped Marcus, I lost my home, my job, most of my possessions. But I gained myself back. Sometimes you have to let go of everything to find what matters. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in deep purples and blues. The tea had grown cold in their cups, but neither seemed to notice. I used to look at the city and see only assets, Elias said finally. Buildings to acquire, deals to make, power to consolidate. Now I look at it and see people, lives affected by the choices we make, by the truths we choose to tell or hide. Naomi nodded. Justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it's about restoration, making things right. Do you think that's possible? Elias asked quietly. After everything my family has done? I think that's why we're both here, Naomi replied. Why God brought our paths together. Your wealth, my mother's evidence. Maybe this is how justice finally comes to light. The peaceful moment wrapped around them like a warm blanket, the city lights below twinkling with possibility rather than threat. For the first time since discovering the truth about her mother's death, Naomi felt steady, grounded in purpose rather than fear. Elias turned to her, his expression earnest. Whatever happens next, I want you to— No! A sharp electronic chime cut through the quiet. Elias pulled his phone from his pocket, and Naomi watched as his face went pale. What is it? She asked, her heart beginning to race. The secure server, he said, his voice tight. Someone's accessed our private files. They know what we've found. The peaceful moment shattered like glass, and the city lights suddenly seemed less like stars and more like watching eyes, marking their every move. The morning sun cast long shadows across the penthouse's marble floors as Elias stood rigid before the wall-mounted television, his fingers wrapped tightly around his coffee mug. Breaking news banners flashed across the screen, accompanied by unflattering photos of him leaving various business meetings. Whitmore Air accused of massive financial fraud, the news anchor announced, her voice crisp and professional. Sources close to the family suggest systematic misconduct spanning several years. Naomi watched from the kitchen counter, her heart sinking as she witnessed Elias's carefully constructed world being dismantled piece by piece. Mrs. Brooks quietly placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. They're twisting everything, Elias said, his voice low but steady. Taking fragments of truth about the family's corruption and pinning it all on me. He set down his untouched coffee with careful precision. The television screen shifted to show a familiar face that made Naomi's blood run cold. Marcus, her ex-boyfriend, appeared polished and sympathetic in a pressed suit, nothing like the monster who had terrorized her for years. "I'm deeply concerned about Naomi's involvement in this situation," Marcus said, his practiced concern making Naomi's stomach turn. "She's always been unstable, prone to conspiracy theories. I tried to help her for years, but—" Elias switched off the TV before Marcus could finish. "I'm so sorry, Naomi. They're using him to destroy your credibility." Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the trembling that had started in her hands. "He looked so normal. No one would ever guess what he did to me." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. Mrs. Brooks moved closer, her presence steady and reassuring. "The Lord knows the truth, dear, and truth has a way of coming to light." Elias's phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming messages. He checked it briefly, his expression growing more concerned. "The document your mother mentioned in her journal, the one about the offshore accounts. We need it now. It's our best chance at proving the family's involvement." "It's in my safety deposit box," Naomi said. "I never knew what it was, just that Mom said to keep it safe." "We'll need to retrieve it immediately," Elias said, already typing instructions to his security team, before they think to look there. Despite Mrs. Brooks's protests about the risks, within an hour, Naomi found herself in the back of an armored SUV, flanked by two of Elias's most trusted security personnel. The drive to the bank felt surreal, the familiar streets now seeming alien and threatening. The security team maintained a tight formation around her as they entered the bank. Everything went smoothly until they exited. As Naomi clutched the envelope from her safety deposit box, a well-dressed woman stepped directly into their path. "Miss Carter," the woman said smoothly, her designer suit and perfect makeup a stark contrast to the cold threat in her eyes. "The Whitmore family would prefer to handle this situation privately. There's no need for anyone to get hurt." Naomi's security team moved closer, but the woman merely smiled. "We're not going to harm you today. Consider this a courtesy call." She gestured subtly, and Naomi noticed several men in suits positioned around the street. "Walk away now, destroy the evidence, and this all goes away. Stay, and we'll be forced to take more decisive action." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. The woman's smile never wavered as she stepped aside, allowing them to pass. The ride back to the penthouse passed in a blur of anxiety and guilt. When the elevator doors finally opened, Naomi found Elias waiting, concern etched across his features. "They were waiting for us," Naomi said, her voice hollow. "They knew exactly where I'd be." She handed him the envelope with trembling hands. "Your family, they're going to destroy you because of me, because you tried to help me." "No," Elias said firmly, taking her shoulders in his hands. "They're trying to destroy me because I finally chose to stand up to them, because I'm doing what's right instead of what's profitable." But Naomi could only see how her presence had upended his life, how her mother's evidence had become the match that would burn down everything he'd built. "I'm just a weapon they're using against you now," she whispered, tears threatening to fall. "Maybe I should—" "Don't," Elias cut her off, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Your mother died trying to expose the truth. We owe it to her, and to ourselves, to finish what she started." Mrs. Brooks appeared with a cup of tea, pressing it into Naomi's hands. "Sometimes the hardest path is the right one, dear, and you don't have to walk it alone." Naomi accepted the tea, but the warmth of the cup couldn't chase away the chill of knowing she had become the very thing she'd spent years running from, a source of danger to someone she cared about. The morning's chaos had made one thing devastatingly clear: the truth would come at a price, and both she and Elias would have to decide if they were ready to pay it. The city lights flickered like distant stars through the penthouse windows as evening settled over Chicago. Naomi stood at the glass, her reflection a ghost against the darkening sky. The day's events played over and over in her mind. The threat at the bank, the smear campaign, her ex-boyfriend's face on, the news. Each memory felt like another brick in the wall she was building around her heart. She waited until after dinner, when the quiet of night wrapped around the penthouse like a thick blanket. Mrs. Brooks had taken Caleb to bed, leaving Naomi and Elias alone in the living room. Her packed bag sat hidden in her room, ready. "I have to leave," Naomi said softly, not turning to face him. "Tonight." Elias looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reviewing legal documents. "No." The word was gentle but firm. "You don't understand." Naomi's voice trembled. "Everything I touch falls apart. Everyone who tries to help me gets hurt." She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in the pain. "Your whole life is crumbling because of me. My life is changing because I finally chose truth over lies." Elias countered, standing up. "This isn't about you destroying anything. This is about standing up to corruption that's existed for decades." Naomi shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "They threatened me today, but the threat wasn't really for me, it was for you. I'm just the weapon they're using to hurt you." She finally turned to face him. "I can't be responsible for that." "Running won't solve anything," Elias said, moving closer. "It's what they want. If we separate now, they win. Everything your mother died trying to expose stays buried." "At least you'll be safe," Naomi whispered. "Safe?" A hint of frustration crept into his voice. "Safe is what allowed all this to happen in the first place. Safe is what I chose every time I looked the other way, every time I suspected something was wrong but did nothing." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm done being safe. I want to be right." The soft sound of footsteps made them both turn. Mrs. Brooks stood in the doorway, her kind face serious in the dim light. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said, moving into the room. "And I think you both need to remember something important." She sat down, patting the couch beside her. Naomi hesitated, then joined her, while Elias took the chair across from them. "Sometimes," Mrs. Brooks began, her voice gentle but firm, "God asks us to stand still in our fear rather than run from it. Remember Moses at the Red Sea? The people wanted to run back to Egypt, back to slavery, because at least that was familiar. But God said, 'Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord.'" Naomi wiped away a tear. "But what if standing still gets someone killed? What if running means the truth dies instead?" Mrs. Brooks countered softly. "Sometimes obedience looks like staying when everything in us wants to flee." Despite Mrs. Brooks's words, Naomi felt herself pulling away emotionally, building walls to protect herself from the pain of what she knew she had to do. She nodded and smiled at appropriate moments, but her mind was already mapping out escape routes, planning how to disappear again. Later that night, Naomi sat on her bed, staring at her packed bag in the corner. The moon cast long shadows across the floor, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. She slipped to her knees beside the bed, clasping her hands. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know what to do anymore. I thought I was finally safe, but now—" Her voice caught. "Now I'm just bringing danger to everyone else. Please, please show me the right path." In his study down the hall, Elias sat at his desk, legal documents spread before him like a paper battlefield. He'd spent hours building defenses against his family's attacks, preparing for the war he knew was coming. But the weight of it all pressed down on him like a physical thing. He pushed back from the desk and closed his eyes. "God," he prayed quietly, "I thought I knew what redemption looked like. I thought protecting Naomi would somehow make up for years of looking the other way. But now—" He paused, struggling with the words. Now I don't know if we're strong enough for this fight, if I'm strong enough. The night stretched on, silent and heavy with uncertainty. In separate rooms, both Naomi and Elias wrestled with their fears, their prayers echoing each other without knowing it. Hope, which had seemed so bright just days ago, now flickered like a candle in a storm, threatening to go out completely. Mrs. Brooks's words about standing still in fear competed with Naomi's ingrained instinct to run, while Elias's determination to fight warred with his growing awareness of just how powerful his enemies were. The truth they sought to expose seemed to be slipping through their fingers, and neither knew if their faith would be enough to hold on to it. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting long shadows across the plush carpet. Naomi sat cross-legged on the guest-room bed, her mother's worn journal open in her lap. She'd been up since dawn, unable to sleep, turning pages she'd read 100 times before but never truly understood until now. Her fingers traced the familiar handwriting, remembering how her mother would write in this very journal every evening after her nursing shifts. The pages carried the slight indentation of pressure from her mother's determined hand, as if each word had been pressed into the paper with purpose. "Lord, guide my steps," Naomi whispered, her mother's favorite prayer slipping from her lips naturally. She turned another page, and something caught her eye that she'd overlooked before. Between notes about suspicious financial transfers and coded references to the Whitmore family's dealings, her mother had repeatedly mentioned something called the Grace and Justice Foundation. Naomi's heart began to beat faster as she noticed a pattern. The foundation appeared in entries spanning several months, always accompanied by hopeful words about truth and righteousness. She reached for her tablet, searching the name online, and her breath caught. The Grace and Justice Foundation was a faith-based legal aid organization providing pro bono representation for victims of corporate fraud and abuse. And there, listed among its earliest benefactors, was a donation from EW Enterprises, Elias Whitmore's company. "Oh, Mama," Naomi whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You knew all along, didn't you? You weren't just gathering evidence. You were building a path to the light." She sat back against the headboard, letting the realization wash over her. Her mother hadn't been planning an exposé or a scandal. She'd been carefully laying groundwork for the truth to emerge through proper channels, through an organization dedicated to justice and mercy. And somehow, whether by divine guidance or cosmic irony, Elias himself had helped fund the very mechanism that could now bring his family's corruption to light. The weight of fear that had been pressing on Naomi's chest began to lift. She'd been looking at this all wrong. Running away wouldn't protect Elias, it would only ensure that darkness won, again. Her mother had shown her the way forward, and it wasn't through power or violence or even self-preservation. It was through standing firmly in the truth, no matter the cost. Naomi found Elias in his home office, surrounded by legal documents and looking exhausted. He glanced up as she entered, his expression softening with concern. "You should be resting," he said quietly. "I know what we need to do," Naomi replied, stepping forward and placing the journal on his desk. "Look at these entries about the Grace and Justice Foundation." Elias leaned forward, scanning the pages she indicated. His eyebrows rose slightly as recognition dawned. "I remember authorizing that donation years ago. It was a small initiative then, barely getting started." "It's not small anymore," Naomi said, "and my mother knew exactly what she was doing when she documented everything. She wasn't just collecting evidence. She was creating a righteous path for the truth." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I need to testify publicly, Elias, through the foundation, not in the shadows, not through leaked documents or anonymous sources. I need to stand up and tell the whole truth, with my name and face attached to it. Elias stood slowly, his face pale. Naomi, that would put you directly in harm's way, and it would destroy what's left of my reputation. Everything I've built. Everything built on lies needs to fall. She said gently, "You know that. You've known it since the moment you chose to protect me instead of your family's secrets." He moved around the desk, running a hand through his hair. "The Foundation's lawyers are good, but they're going up against some of the most powerful people in the country. My family will try to discredit you, destroy you." "They already are," Naomi reminded him. "But they can't destroy the truth, not if we refuse to hide it anymore." Silence filled the room as Elias absorbed her words. Outside, the city hummed with morning traffic, life continuing as normal while their world teetered on the edge of transformation. Finally, Elias turned to face her fully. The weariness in his eyes had been replaced by something else, a quiet certainty that matched what Naomi felt in her heart. "You're right," he said simply. "We can't keep playing their game, trying to outmaneuver them in the shadows. That's their territory." He picked up her mother's journal, holding it with reverence. "Your mother knew the way. Light destroys darkness not by fighting it, but by simply existing." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. "So you'll stand with me?" "Every step of the way," he answered without hesitation. "Whatever comes next, reputation, wealth, status, none of it matters compared to doing what's right." The morning sun had climbed higher now, flooding the office with golden light. Naomi looked at Elias and saw no trace of fear or regret in his face. For the first time since this all began, they both felt true peace, not because they knew they would win, but because they knew they were choosing right over easy, truth over safety, light over darkness. The path ahead would be difficult, possibly dangerous, but they would walk it together, guided by the wisdom of a nurse who had dared to document truth, and the grace of a God who made paths where none seemed possible. Elias reached for his phone. "I'll contact the Foundation today. We'll do this properly, through the right channels?" Naomi nodded, feeling the rightness of the decision settle in her soul. Whatever came next, they would face it standing in the light. The morning light streamed through the penthouse windows as Naomi sat before a camera, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The legal team from the Faith and Justice Foundation had arrived promptly after her call, setting up recording equipment with practiced efficiency. Elias stood quietly to the side, his presence an anchor of strength. "Please state your name for the record," the lead attorney said gently. "Naomi Carter." Her voice came out clear and strong, surprising even herself. The weight of her mother's journal rested in her lap, its worn pages containing the truth that would change everything. "Take your time, Ms. Carter. Start from the beginning." For the next 2 hours, Naomi spoke with careful precision, detailing everything she had discovered in her mother's writings. She described the pattern of suspicious financial transactions, the coded references to offshore accounts, and the systematic abuse of power that had defined the Whitmore empire for decades. "My mother worked as a nurse for the Whitmore family," she explained, her fingers tracing the journal's spine. She documented everything she witnessed, protecting the evidence until it could be revealed safely. While Naomi testified, forensic accountants and document specialists worked in an adjacent room, meticulously authenticating every page of the journal. The entire process was thorough, leaving no room for doubt or legal challenge. "The handwriting analysis is conclusive," one expert announced, looking up from his equipment. "These entries match known samples of Sarah Carter's writing. The ink aging and paper composition also confirm the timeline." By early afternoon, federal agents who had been quietly vetted and cleared of any Whitmore connections arrived to take custody of the evidence. Elias had insisted on agents from outside Chicago working through trusted contacts at the Faith and Justice Foundation to ensure independence. "I need to make a statement too," Elias said quietly, stepping forward. The camera was still rolling as he moved to sit beside Naomi. "I was ignorant of many things, but that's no excuse," he began, his voice steady but humbled. "I inherited and benefited from corruption, and though I didn't create it, I failed to stop it. I'm stepping down from Whitmore Enterprises effective immediately." Naomi watched him speak, seeing the invisible weights lifting from his shoulders with each word of truth. This was what courage looked like, not the absence of fear, but choosing right despite it. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Legal documents were signed, evidence was secured, and carefully planned arrests began across the city. Years of protected corruption began crumbling under the weight of irrefutable proof. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Naomi's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her hands shook slightly as she read the headline, "Marcus Bennett arrested on multiple charges." A photo showed her ex-boyfriend being led away in handcuffs, his face twisted in fury as federal agents escorted him to a waiting vehicle. "He can't hurt you anymore," Mrs. Brooks said softly, appearing at Naomi's side with a cup of tea. "None of them can." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but they weren't tears of fear this time. "It's really over," she whispered. "Not over," Mrs. Brooks corrected gently. "Beginning. God's timing is always perfect, even when we don't understand the wait." As evening approached, Elias prepared for one final task. He straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. Not to work, but to walk away. "I'll go with you," Naomi offered, but Elias shook his head with a small smile. "This part I need to do alone," he said, "but I'll be back." The elevator ride down his corporate tower felt different this time. Each floor that passed represented years of his life spent chasing the wrong things, measuring success in dollars rather than truth. But as he reached the lobby, his steps were lighter than they had ever been. Security guards nodded respectfully as he crossed the marble floor one last time. Outside, the January wind whipped around the building's base, but Elias barely felt the cold. He paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the glass and steel monument to power that had been his prison for so long. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his security, badge and corporate keys. The metal felt heavy in his palm, not with regret, but with the weight of change. He turned and handed them to the waiting security chief. "Thank you, sir," the man said quietly. "It's been an honor." Elias nodded once, then turned away from the tower. The sun was setting behind the Chicago skyline, painting the clouds in shades of gold and purple. Each step away from the building made him feel lighter, freer, more himself than he had ever been. His phone buzzed with messages from board members and business associates, but for the first time in his life, Elias felt no obligation to respond. The truth was out, justice was in motion, and he had finally chosen the right path, regardless of the cost. The corporate tower cast a long shadow across the street, but Elias walked out of it and into the remaining sunlight. His feet carried him toward home, not the cold penthouses and boardrooms of his past, but the warm space where truth and faith had finally broken through his carefully constructed walls. He thought of Naomi's courage, of Mrs. Brooks's wisdom, of his son's innocent truth-telling, and of all the ways God had been working to bring him to this moment. The weight of billions might be gone from his bank account soon, but Elias Whitmore had never felt richer. The morning sun painted gentle stripes across the hardwood floors of a modest craftsman house, so different from the sleek penthouse that had been their sanctuary just weeks ago. Naomi traced her fingers along the warm windowsill, watching leaves dance in the spring breeze. The quiet street below felt worlds away from Chicago's towering skyline. Still getting used to the view?" Elias's voice carried from the kitchen, where the smell of coffee mingled with toast. Naomi smiled, turning to find him in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, another change from his former life of tailored suits. "It's peaceful here. Sometimes I forget we're still under protection." "That's the point," he said, sliding a mug across the counter to her. "The marshals chose well. Small enough to blend in, big enough to start over." The past weeks had brought a cascade of changes. After their testimony rocked the foundations of the Whitmore Empire, the protective custody had been immediate and necessary. But instead of feeling like running away, it felt like coming home to something they'd both been searching for. "The shelter called," Naomi said, warming her hands around the mug. "They need someone to lead the evening support group tonight. The regular facilitator is sick." Elias nodded encouragingly. "You should do it. You connect with those women in a way no one else can." "Because I've been there," she said softly. The women's shelter had become her sanctuary in this new city, a place where her past pain transformed into purpose. One of them asked me yesterday how I found the courage to speak up. I told her it wasn't courage. It was finally believing I deserved better. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Brooks entered with 6-year-old Caleb, who immediately ran to Elias with a paper clutched in his hand. "Daddy, look what I drew at school!" Caleb thrust the artwork forward, bouncing on his toes. The word "daddy" still caught in Elias's throat sometimes, a gift he never expected to receive. Elias crouched down to examine the crayon masterpiece. "This is amazing, buddy. Tell me about it." "It's our family. See? There's you and me and Grandma Helen and Miss Naomi and our new house and even the bird that visits our feeder." Caleb pointed to each figure with pride. Mrs. Brooks set her purse down, smiling at the scene. "He worked on it all morning. His teacher said he was very focused." The relationship between father and son was still new, tender as a spring seedling, but growing stronger each day. After the truth came out, Caleb's mother had agreed to let him spend time with Elias, recognizing the importance of healing old wounds for their son's sake. "I have that meeting with the young entrepreneurs at the community center," Elias said, carefully placing Caleb's artwork on the refrigerator. "Would you like to come with me for a bit, Caleb? You can bring your drawing pad." "Can I really?" Caleb's eyes lit up. He loved watching his father work with the local business students, even if he didn't understand everything being discussed. Elias had found unexpected joy in mentoring aspiring business owners, teaching them to build success on integrity rather than compromise. His sessions focused not just on strategy and numbers, but on ethical decision-making and social responsibility. "Having him there reminds me of what really matters," Elias had told Naomi one evening. "When I look at him taking notes in his own way, I remember that everything we build leaves a legacy for the next generation." Mrs. Brooks watched them prepare to leave, her eyes soft with gratitude. "Who would have thought," she mused to Naomi, "that losing everything would give him everything that matters?" Naomi understood. She'd lost her own carefully constructed life of independence, her job, her apartment, but gained a family she never expected. The women at the shelter often asked how she could smile after everything she'd been through. The answer was simple. She was finally free. Later that afternoon, Naomi stood before a circle of women at the shelter, their faces reflecting back stories similar to her own. "I used to think survival meant staying quiet," she began, her voice steady and sure. "But sometimes survival means speaking up, even when your voice shakes. Sometimes it means trusting that the truth is stronger than fear." One woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Another straightened her shoulders, hope flickering across her face. Naomi recognized that look, the first glimpse of possibility after years of impossibility. When she returned home that evening, she found Elias and Caleb at the dining room table, surrounded by papers covered in both professional diagrams and childish doodles. Mrs. Brooks was in her favorite armchair, crocheting what looked like a new blanket. "How did it go?" Elias asked, looking up from helping Caleb color in a business chart he'd drawn. "Good," Naomi said, settling into a chair beside them. "Really good. One of the women is ready to file for divorce. Another is enrolling in nursing school. Just like your mama," Mrs. Brooks noted without looking up from her crocheting. "Healing runs in your blood, child." Naomi touched the worn journal she still carried in her bag, her mother's words now a source of strength rather than sorrow. The truth had cost them the comfort of wealth and status, but it had purchased something far more valuable: peace. Elias reached over and squeezed her hand briefly, understanding in his eyes. They'd both lost the lives they'd built, but found the lives they were meant to live. His phone no longer rang with corporate emergencies, and her days no longer revolved around looking over her shoulder. Instead, they'd found purpose in helping others find their way to freedom. "Daddy!" Caleb piped up, adding a final crayon flourish to his paper. "Can we have pizza for dinner? The kind with the thick crust?" Elias laughed, the sound easy and unrestrained. "I think we can manage that. What do you say, everyone? Pizza and maybe a movie?" Mrs. Brooks set aside her crocheting with a smile. "I say it sounds just right." As they gathered around the kitchen island later, planning their evening, Naomi watched the simple domesticity of it all. Caleb's excited chatter, Mrs. Brooks's gentle corrections about using a napkin, Elias's relaxed posture as he served paper plates instead of fine china. This was what healing looked like. Ordinary moments strung together like pearls, each one a small triumph over the past. The loss of status and wealth had cleared away the clutter, making room for something far more precious: a life built on truth, strengthened by faith, and rich with genuine connection. As the spring breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the open windows, Naomi realized that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as losses, and the deepest peace arrives after the storm. The spring sunshine streamed through the windows of a modest office building, warming the simple wooden desk where Elias sat reviewing paperwork. Gone were the marble floors and chrome fixtures of his former corporate life. Instead, soft beige carpeting and gentle blue walls created a welcoming atmosphere for those seeking help. "The last settlement papers came through this morning," Elias said, looking up as Naomi entered with 2 cups of coffee. She placed one before him, the ceramic mug replacing his old crystal tumblers. "The Whitmore Financial Group is officially dissolved." Naomi settled into the chair across from him, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength that had grown stronger over these past months. "How do you feel about it?" "Lighter," he answered without hesitation. "Each restitution payment feels like setting something right that was wrong for far too long." Through the open door, they could hear Mrs. Brooks in the reception area, her warm voice greeting a young woman who had arrived for counseling. The familiar sound of her grandson's laughter echoed down the hallway. The little boy now spent 3 afternoons a week with Elias, building towers with blocks and slowly learning to call him Daddy. "The housing coordinator called earlier," Naomi shared, sipping her coffee. 2 more families moved into the transitional apartments yesterday. Both mothers have already enrolled in the job training program. Elias nodded, a gentle smile touching his face. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're given safety and support instead of judgment. The foundation they had established, Hope's Haven, now occupied a renovated building in a quiet neighborhood. The lower floors housed counseling offices and legal aid services, while the upper levels contained temporary housing for those escaping abuse. It wasn't fancy, but it was secure, staffed by professionals who understood trauma, and grounded in the faith that had sustained Naomi through her darkest days. "Did you see the thank you card from Maria?" Naomi asked, reaching for a colorful envelope on the desk. "She found a permanent apartment and started her new job last week." Elias read the heartfelt words, remembering the terrified woman who had arrived 3 months ago with nothing but a backpack and broken spirit. "This is what real wealth looks like," he said softly. "Not numbers in an account, but lives being restored." The foundation's funding had come from the dissolution of the Whitmore Empire. As federal investigations revealed the full scope of corruption, the family's assets were seized and redirected. Elias had voluntarily surrendered his personal fortune, keeping only enough to establish the foundation and maintain a modest living. The decision had shocked the business world, but brought him a peace that no amount of money ever had. Naomi reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "Your father would never understand this choice." "No," Elias agreed, "but I'm not living for his approval anymore. Every day I see people choosing to be brave, to start over, to trust again. That's the legacy I want to build now." Through the window, they could see the foundation's small garden where residents tended vegetables and flowers, a metaphor for the new growth possible after devastating storms. The sight reminded Naomi of her mother's journal, now safely preserved as evidence, but whose spirit lived on in every person they helped. "Sometimes I think about that New Year's Eve," Naomi mused. "How terrified I was, running through those streets. I never imagined that running into the wrong car would lead to all of this. God has a way of working through our mistakes," Mrs. Brooks commented, appearing in the doorway with a stack of intake forms. "Though I do wish you two would stop working through lunch. The volunteer training starts in an hour." They gathered their things, preparing to meet the newest group of survivors who had chosen to become mentors for others. The Foundation's peer support program was one of its most powerful features. People who had walked through darkness now helping to light the way for others. As they headed to the conference room, a car backfired on the street outside. Naomi continued walking, engaged in conversation with Mrs. Brooks about the upcoming support group schedule. It took several steps before she realized she hadn't jumped at the sudden noise, her shoulders hadn't tensed, her heart hadn't raced. Elias noticed too, seeing the recognition dawn in her eyes. They shared a look of understanding, another small victory in a journey of healing that had transformed them both. Where once there had been a woman who flinched at every shadow and a man imprisoned by his family's expectations, now stood two people who had chosen truth over fear, purpose over power, and love over legacy. In the conference room, faces both familiar and new greeted them. Each person carried their own story of survival, their own path to this place of new beginnings. As Naomi took her seat beside Elias, she felt the solid presence of the building around them, not a fortress to keep pain locked away, but a sanctuary where healing could take root and grow. Mrs. Brooks opened the training with a prayer, her grandson coloring quietly in the corner. The simple scene captured everything they had gained by losing what once seemed essential: community, purpose, and the chance to help write new endings to stories that once seemed hopeless. Through the window, the spring breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from their garden, and Naomi sat comfortably in her chair, at peace with all the doors, literal and metaphorical, that now stood between her past and present. She was no longer running, no longer hiding. She was home. The winter air nipped gently at Naomi's cheeks as she stood on the rooftop garden of the Hope and Truth Foundation building. Gone were the towering skyscrapers of Chicago's downtown. Their new home was a converted 3-story brick building in a quieter city, with warm wooden floors and walls painted in soft, welcoming colors. The space felt alive with purpose rather than pretense. A year had passed since that fateful New Year's Eve when she'd stumbled into Elias Whitmore's car, terrified and desperate. Now, watching different fireworks paint the sky in gentle bursts of gold and red, Naomi felt the profound difference in her heart. These explosions didn't make her flinch anymore. They reminded her of God's perfect timing. "Hot chocolate!" Elias appeared beside her, holding 2 steaming mugs topped with tiny marshmallows. His face had softened over. The past year, the sharp edges of corporate pressure replaced by laugh lines around his eyes. He wore a simple sweater instead of his once signature tailored suits, and somehow it made him look more distinguished, not less. "Thank you," Naomi said, accepting the mug with a smile. "Remember last year? I thought these fireworks were gunshots. And I thought my life was ending when everything fell apart." Elias replied, his voice gentle with reflection. "Turns out it was just beginning." Below them, through the glass walls of the Foundation's community room, they could see their extended family celebrating. Mrs. Brooks was teaching her grandson, Elias's son, how to make paper chains for decorations, while several of the Foundation's residents and staff shared snacks and stories. The sight warmed Naomi more than the hot chocolate. "Sometimes I still can't believe how everything changed," Naomi said, watching her breath cloud in the cool air. "That night I was just running away, again thinking it was my only option. Getting into the wrong car should have been another disaster." She shook her head, amazed. "Instead, it was God literally steering me toward healing." Elias leaned against the railing, his expression thoughtful. "You know what's remarkable? You talk about getting into the wrong car, but it was the first right choice either of us had made in a long time. You chose to trust despite your fear. I chose to protect despite the cost." The Foundation building sat on a small hill, giving them a view of the city spread out below. It wasn't as glamorous as Chicago, but there was something honest about its modest skyline and scattered firework displays. Each burst of light represented families and communities celebrating together, real people living real lives. "The women downstairs?" Naomi gestured to the shelter portion of their building. "They remind me so much of myself last year, scared, ashamed, thinking they're alone." Her voice grew stronger. "But now we can offer them what I found here: safety, support, and a chance to reclaim their voices." "You did that," Elias said firmly. "You showed me what real courage looks like. I spent decades building wealth while hiding from the truth. You lost everything, but never lost your integrity." He turned to face her fully. "Naomi, you didn't just find your purpose here. You saved me from a life of silenced conscience. I'll always be grateful for that." Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of gratitude, of joy, of seeing God's hand in even the darkest moments. "We saved each other," she corrected gently, "and now we get to help save others." The Foundation had already helped dozens of women escape abuse and rebuild their lives. They offered legal aid, counseling, job training, and most importantly, a community of support. The faith-based approach meant they treated the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about thriving. From below, they heard Mrs. Brooks calling everyone to gather for the countdown. Elias's son, now a regular part of their lives through shared custody, came bounding up the stairs to the roof. "Dad! Naomi! It's almost time!" His excitement was contagious, and Elias scooped him up with a laugh. The boy had been one of the greatest gifts of this new life. Watching Elias learn to be a father, choosing patience and presence over power and position, had been beautiful to witness. He was breaking generational patterns of control and replacing them with love. As voices below began counting down from 10, Naomi looked at the simple ring on her finger. Not an engagement ring, but a promise ring Elias had given her 3 months ago. They were taking things slowly, building a foundation of trust and shared purpose before considering marriage. It felt right, letting their relationship grow naturally in God's timing rather than rushing to fill their emptiness. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Fireworks erupted across the city in earnest now, a celebration of endings and beginnings. Elias's son clapped his hands over his ears, giggling at the noise while safely nestled in his father's arms. The moment captured everything they'd gained by losing what they thought they needed. Happy New Year, Elias said softly, reaching for Naomi's hand with his free one. Happy New Year, she replied, squeezing his fingers. They stood together, watching the light show, paint hope across the sky. Naomi thought about the journal that had started it all, her mother's final gift, revealing truth that brought down an empire but built something far more valuable in its place. The Whitmore name was no longer associated with power and corruption. Instead, it was becoming known for redemption and healing. Below them, the foundation's residents and staff hugged and celebrated, their voices carrying up through the crisp night air. These were the fruits of their choice to stand in truth rather than run from it. A community built on faith, second chances, and the courage to begin again. The fireworks continued to bloom gently overhead, no longer heralds of chaos and fear, but beautiful reminders that light always follows darkness. Naomi leaned her head against Elias's shoulder, at peace with where God had led them. She didn't need to run anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be. In the moment's quiet joy, both Naomi and Elias understood the profound truth they now lived. Redemption wasn't just possible, it was promised to those who chose to walk in faith, even through the darkest nights. Their story wasn't about what they'd lost, but about what they'd found. Purpose, family, and the quiet certainty that God's plans were always greater than their fears. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.